drive-thru.
That's right, Grandma. Welcome to the Derek Pernesiglio Show. I am Derek Pernesiglio. We've got a great show lined up for you this afternoon. Great guest coming in. So much history in this guest and a great storyteller, too. His father is in the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. His grandfather is also in the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame, racing the Indy 500 for years. And his father was a car builder, fabricator, and now you're a car builder and fabricator yourself. Andy Stapp, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Thank you for having me. It's pretty neat to be on this situation right here. I'm digging it.
Cool. Well, it's great to have you on. And what people really don't realize is how much history you have in this sport. Not just you, but your whole family. I mean, your grandfather raced at Indy back in the 20s when it was still the Brickyard.
Yes. We have a picture of him where he jumped in a guy's sprint car bobber when Eddie Rickenbacker was actually laying out and building the track at Indy. He jumped in the guy's bobber car, put on a pair of aviator goggles, and was running laps around the track, just checking it out, giving them feedback, and he was like the first guy to run around Indianapolis Motor Speedway because somebody had a sprint car nearby, a little bobber car. He jumped in and went out and checked it out. And that's the way you used to be able to do it back in the good old days. You know, it was partially constructed, bricks in some places, it was dirt in others, and he went out and made a few laps.
So before the Indy 500 ever happened, he turned laps on it.
Yes, before the track was ever built. While they were still in construction, he went out and played around in this bobber. And a bobber is early Ford, no tail tank. It didn't look like a modern day sprint car. I sent you one of the pictures of it. It's in there somewhere. But it's just a cool old narrow hard rubber tire, wire wheel, just basically take the horses off the carriage, put an engine in, and go play. And that's what the car was. And he jumped in and ran some laps early on.
You know, just looking at those cars back in the day, those guys were crazy. Cloth helmets, no seat belts. I mean, just racing on, what'd you say, brick and dirt? Oh,
yeah, at that time, the reason they call Indy the Brickyard was the whole track was built with bricks.
Right.
2.5 miles of racetrack, it was all just laid out bricks. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a big change from the boards that they ran on before this. I mean, Altoona, Pennsylvania, there were quite a few board tracks all over the country, coast to coast. There were these huge 1.5 mile, 2.5 mile board tracks with huge banking, 12-foot tall, 12-story tall banking in the corners built like an old wooden roller coaster.
I've seen video of it.
Yeah, staggering. We were looking at one earlier today, a video of them at breakfast this morning.
And they were turning like ridiculous speeds too, because racing on a wood surface.
Right? The wood surface had very little friction, and the things would just flat roll around there. You're on the little narrow tires, and they were running 100, 120 mile an hour on the board tracks back in those days.
In the 20s.
In the 20s.
120 miles.
With no seat belts, no nothing. And when you crashed, I have a picture in my phone I just found yesterday of a car that went over the guardrail and out, and where it went out, it was a 14-story drop or 12-story drop to the ground, and the car was another 200 feet, 300 feet, well, maybe let's go 200 yards from where he went off the banking at the top to where the car ended up. I kind of got to figure he didn't survive it. Mm-hmm. I think the heart attack on the fall down would have killed me off. But, yeah, one of the gruesome, pictures, staggering, but that's the way things were back then.
Yeah, it was way more life risking back then.
Those tough SOBs wanted to race.
Yeah.
They were serious about it, and a lot of them didn't go home.
Yeah.
But there was always somebody standing there with a helmet, or going to find a helmet to fill their place and go again.
Now, you never saw your grandfather race or anything like that, right?
Never saw him race, no.
Okay.
I was 14 when he passed away.
Oh, all right. I got you. So how did you go from California to Indiana? How did that all happen?
I say now that my dad was a huge visionary. He realized just how screwed up California was getting in the 70s and decided it was no place to raise kids and a family. Now they've proved it right, but he moved out of there, and we moved to Indiana in 1971. Now, prior to that, we were going back east racing like a band of gypsies in a pickup truck with a camper on the back of it, back and forth. But my little sister was born in 71, my sister Susanna. And at that point, they decided it was time to relocate back to the Midwest where things were a whole lot more normal. And it was the central for all the racing we were doing. It's kind of tough to tote from California back to the Midwest, go all the way to the Syracuse and go to New York and go, all over the eastern seaboard as well. When you're from California, it's a pretty lengthy tow, but when you're centrally based in Indiana, it took, half of that trip away from it.
So racing has always been the family business then. Your dad, when you were born, was racing. There was no business that he had and then went racing on the weekends. It was Monday through Friday doing something associated with the sport.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's kind of a really cool thing with us Stapps is we're really opposed to any kind of real job. So we're really good at racing because we're too afraid to steal and too lazy to work hard. So you kind of got to go racing, and that's the only fill-in between. But and I know it's a lot of work to race. But yes, he had Dad built cars for people. He for all different customers. I mean, he had cars coast to coast in the 60s. He was building race cars for guys, and he'd go home to California. My granddad had an air conditioning shop in Hollywood. West Hollywood, and it was an 8-bay air conditioning shop. And my dad had a bay and a half and a fab area in the end of it. So, I mean, you got to consider something. My grandpa was putting air conditioning in cars in the 40s for the movie stars in Hollywood. Before about the time they put windows in them, he was putting air conditioning in them. And houses weren't even air conditioned.
Retrofitting them.
Well, creating air conditioning units to put in them before the factories came out with air conditioning in cars. He was air conditioning cars before it was...
He had to custom build some stuff.
Yes, before you could buy them from... And, I mean, really, back then you didn't have your Chevrolet. You had Duesenberg, you had Packard.
Okay.
You had car companies that weren't like your standard go to a dealership, buy a Ford. Things were a little bit different back then. And he was... Yeah, they were putting air conditioning in things for the elite in California. So my grandpa, when he raced, his crew chief... I had it just a second ago.
Age will do that, huh?
Yeah, oh God. His crew chief was a gentleman named Cotton Henning. Okay. And the two of them were like Mutt and Jeff. They were inseparable. Cotton's brother was a producer in Hollywood. He did little shows that very few people would know about. Gilligan's Island, the Beverly Hillbillies, the Monkees.
Was this that picture that you showing me with the overturned race car and it was on a movie set or something back in the 20s or 30s?
Yes.
I remember you showing me this picture. I forgot it.
Through all these connections, my grandpa, there was a Clark Gable movie, To Please a Lady. Okay. And my grandpa was one of the motorsports, what do they call him? Basically, he was technical director from the motorsports side for the movies.
Technical consultant or something?
Technical consultant,
okay.
Yes. He would tell them when things were right and were wrong. And that picture I showed you, the car's on its side, a bunch of people standing around it. It doesn't even have a drive shaft in it. It's all laid over.
Right.
If you can edit this in, you can put that picture in a little while because it's in all the ones I sent you. But it's so cool because they have all these people and they're holding the car up to keep it from scuffing this guy's really nice Indy race car. And then the driver's laying on the ground in front of it. It's all in the movie set. My grandfather is about mid-engine of the car wearing a Boyle fire suit. It has a triangle on the front, said Boyle. And that was Iron Mike Boyle. He was he was a Teamsters union manager for the Teamsters electricians union in Chicago. Uh-huh. And the guy had a pretty moderate salary. And he had a 2 and a 3 car IndyCar team, shops and everything in Indianapolis that was like 20 times what his salary was. So Iron Mike had some pretty cool stuff going on because he figured out how to get enough money to go racing right. I don't know, legal, illegal, I'm not going to say because I wasn't there. But, man had some really, Umbrella Mike, they called him, Iron Mike. He had a couple different nicknames, but Boyle was... And that shop is getting restored in Indianapolis now. Really? A couple of the cars are restored. Roy Carruthers is involved with a lot of that stuff going on up there. Mm-hmm. And they have restored one of the haulers from that era. And it's like a straight truck, like in between a semi and basically like a top kick truck that you have now, Penske rental truck, mm-hmm. with a flatbed on the back of it, sides on it. The cars rolled up onto it. So they rolled out of the shop, rolled up onto this truck and went across town to the Speedway, which wasn't very far away because that shop was just off 16th Street down by Ralph Smuthler Shops.
Oh my God.
So kind of historic, neat area and neat stuff going on. So all that, Cotton Henning, like I say, his brother produced all these things. So Buddy Epson was in my grandpa's air conditioning shop pretty regularly, would come in, hang out with him.
Wow.
And this other really cool guy named James Garner used to come by and hang out just because he liked listening to the stories and liked the old racing history. And then he kind of made it famous between Rockford Files and Grand Prix and all his other, super neat guy. I've got a few pictures of the two of them hanging out and sitting there talking and smiling and having a good time.
For those of you who are just tuning in, Andy Stapp joins us in the studio, and we're going to change gears really quick. I talked to your sister. I dug up a little bit of dirt on you.
She has all of it. She has a much better memory than I do, too.
Yeah. Okay, you got to tell me the story of being nicknamed 24 Laps. So she told me about 10 or 11 different instances where you could lead 24 perfect laps in a main event
and step right on my pecker with both feet and drive off top of the racetrack. I'm going to tell you something. That was just a blood pressure test on my dad just to see if his heart and his blood vessels were working well, because I could run off top of the racetrack and I don't even know where he was in the facility, and I could see him blow up from there. Yeah.
I can't imagine what the rides home were like.
Oh, unbearable. There's so many of them that were totally unbearable. I could do that. And it's like it was just this run off in the corner and just miss the entrance to the corner by just a touch and not get rotated enough. Not long ago, Facebook is a mean thing. The video showed up. I was qualifying at Bloomington. First lap was really good. Sailed off into on the second lap. Missed just a little bit going into one. And right rear hook. That baby stood up and went off the end. And I was like, yeah, it brought back really bad memories. I could do that at Lawrenceburg. Thank God. And explain it, too. A lot of our racetracks in Indiana where we grew up racing, Paragon, Bloomington, Lawrenceburg, Gas City. Most of them did not have an outside wall. So when you ran in on the cushion and you're up at the top, and I mean, it's each lap, you got to be really consistent and focused the whole time.
There's grass after the cushion.
There's grass, there's down, it's ditch, there's all kinds of stuff out there. But when you screw up, you just drive right off the top of it and get the baby turned and come back on the backstretch. But half the field's gone by the time you get back to the track. So yeah, you can be leading and sail it off the top, and holy cow, big guy was pissed. And I was too, but it didn't matter how pissed I was. He had me covered.
Susanna told me that, what was it? It was usually Kokomo that had happened or Bloomington, whatever was a 2-hour ride back to the shop. And she said that if it was silent back to the shop, it was 2 hours of getting your ass chewed before going home, or it was just a 2-hour ride of getting your ass chewed
all the way home. Yes.
I could just see your father, because I've seen you with Joey. And there were so many times I watched you just ripping Joey apart, and I'm like, man, I'm so happy that's not me.
I come by it honestly. I've been trained well. We ran Kokomo one night, and I was qualified to start on the pole. Went out in the heat race, and the heat race really didn't matter for anything. But, man, we were feeling good. I mean, the car was good. I was feeling good. And second, third lap of the heat race, I stepped on it and ran over somebody and hung a thing in the chain link fence outside of turns 1 and 2. You're sitting in the car and you're looking at the sky because the car's nosed up, hanging in the fence on the front axle. You're looking straight in the air.
Wait. Is this the story where your old man was down on the track screaming, "Don't let him out because I'm going to kick his ass," or something?
He was back at the trailer, actually. He was throwing things in the trailer, loading up. Jim Lipke and Vic Lipke were down on the racetrack, and they're like, "Unbuckle, come on down, then we'll get the wrecker up there and set the thing down." You're sitting in this thing looking like you're on a space shuttle, looking at the sky, and I'm like, I'm not going to unbuckle out of this thing because I'll slide on my back off the back of the roll cage. I don't have those Carl Edwards capabilities of doing a backflip in midair to get to the ground on my feet. So I know I was going to fall on my head. So I told Lipke, I said, no, I'm going to stay here. You set this thing down off, get the roll cage or the wrecker. You set it down on the ground. When it gets on the ground, I'll maybe get out of it then. I said, but my dad's down there somewhere and I know he's pissed. I'm safer right up here right now, and I'm going to hang here until things calm down. And Lipke laughed. He says, that's probably a pretty good idea. I said, if you drop it from the wrecker, it still ain't going to hurt any more than if I unbuckle and fall out of here on my head.
What did Bopper say after that?
That ride home was just he and I. Oh, Susanna had a softball game that day. Mom went to a softball game with Susanna, and they didn't make it to the track. So it's just Dad and I. He didn't say a damn thing. He was silent all the way. I mean, loading the stuff in the trailer was, he didn't care if it was strapped down. It didn't matter. Just get it in here. We're leaving. So we rolled out while the B main was going on, and then we headed home. We got home, and it was still daylight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Mom comes out, and she's all freaked out, like, why are you home? You're not supposed to be home for hours. And, yeah, on the way home, to preface this, we got to Westfield, largest Dairy Queen in the state of Indiana, and I couldn't take it anymore. And I looked over at him, I said, I wish you'd just yell, scream, blow up, do something, because the silence is absolutely killing me. And he started, then he hesitated, he checked up and stopped. The rest ride home silent. We get out of the truck in front of the house. Man, I couldn't get in my car and leave fast enough. As he's walking across the front yard, Mom comes out. She says, why are you home? You shouldn't be home yet. And he says, ask your, cussing like hell, ask your damn kid. And in the house he went. And my dad didn't drink, but I know he went in to get something soda-wise. It was hard enough that, and he calmed down the next day, back to the shop, unloaded the torn up junk race car, and started working on it, putting it back together for the midweek race coming up.
I'm sure there was a lesson to be learned from this, wasn't there?
Okay, I was really dumb because I don't guess I learned all these lessons.
Was that in the car that's behind you in that photo?
No.
For those who are just listening in on the podcast, there's this beautiful Gene Crucian photo of Andy sitting on the right rear.
It's a good hair day.
I was going to say, it must have been a windy day.
No, it's just good. I had Joey hair back then. My youngest son has hair just like that now.
Now, was that the car that basically ended your career? Was that the one you got hurt in?
No, that's a good one. That was the '86 Challenger.
Okay.
That thing was sweet. I had kind of wondered. I must have torn it up because Susanna must have put some shoe polish 77s back on it because I guess I'd crashed it somewhere and knocked the number off the right rear corner. That's kind of, looking kind of rough there. Normally they were lettered. That car was blue, silver tail, silver down the front of it, black frame. Just a cool looking car. We bought that car from Butch Smith, Kentucky engine builder. That was a number 47 car that Kelly Kinzer had driven. And I tore up the J&J car I had before that and killed it. So it was at Terre Haute. Didn't turn it over and killed the frame. That's talent. That takes special skill to do that. So in the panic during the week, we needed a new car. So we got hold of Butch. And the following Friday, we met him at Bloomington and brought that one home in the back of the truck, thrashed like crazy, and ran it the next weekend, put it together. It was just basically a kit, frame, body, torsion arms, Nerf bars. So we put all our stuff into it and went on racing from there. Painted it, so Butch didn't really want us running his paint scheme. He liked his stuff to go fast and not get torn up, I guess. He didn't want to be associated.
So you officially quit racing from a wreck, right? Is that what put you out?
I tore up. I had a 88.5 Challenger. That was an 86. The car was great. We ran it through the end of 86, ran it all the way through 87, sold it. One of the few cars that I was able to sell. I mean, most of them went to the scrapyard. They didn't make it to the resale visit. They were kind of
from these stories. It sounds
pieces.
like it.
Yeah. So that one we sold and bought a new 88 Challenger. And the 88 Challenger was the worst race car I've ever driven. And it had me convinced that I kind of forgot over the winter how to drive.
Why was it bad?
Because we went to Florida and the car was terrible. It was so bad down there. We put Rocky Hodges in it, and he couldn't make the thing go anywhere either. And we ended up blowing the engine. We broke 2 engines while we were there. And then Dad had a trucking company. I did my damnedest to make his business a nonprofit organization because I spent everything his trucks could make on race cars. But while we were gone, one of the truck drivers had run one of the semis off into a overflowed creek, river, whatever, trying to get through. And it ingested water. It bent a connecting rod, and while we were gone, that connecting rod gave up and broke. And so we lost 2 engines in Florida, and we lost an engine on a truck at home. Not picking on them, it wasn't their fault, but Gertie Engines was doing all of our, Joe Gertie and his dad Earl, they were doing all our engines, a lot of them at the time. And a really cool thing was we could get an invoice from them. It was engine repair. So my 2 sprint car engines and Dad's semi-truck engine all got written off on the books as race car, or as all semi-truck engines. Dad's trucks had really bad engine problems at times because, we'd break things and the trucks would, they'd get written off as expense against those. But that one was fast. My 88 Challenger, we never got it right. Partway through 88, just past the halfway point, Challenger realized that everybody was unhappy. The World of Outlaw guys were first. They got new cars. They built an 88.5 Challenger. The guys around the Outlaws all got new cars. We were, again, my dad was stubborn. We were determined to figure out what was wrong with the damn thing, because if you can't figure it out, you can't make the next one faster. So we're changing mounts, pickup points, we're changing everything about it. We're cutting on that car and changing things and everything. Never could get it right. We changed our setups. We changed everything around. So late in 88, we got the replacement car, the 88.5. Went to Bloomington the first night, and I was running second. I clipped a tire in the infield and took an oil line off the scavenge line on the dry sump. Realized what I had done right away, because I was smelling oil and I could feel it, and it was spraying around. So shut it off, rolled in the infield. We fixed it, took the wings off of it, went to Eldora the next day, and I was running second at Eldora with Hewitt leading. And the two of us were having a heck of a battle. Hewitt's a hero. And Hewitt's a longtime hero. I mean, that guy.
Hell yeah, I got time for an interview.
Yeah, like a puppy dog. I followed him around. I still to this day think the world of Jack Hewitt. The things I learned from him, like not to drink water because we know what fish do in it. But, and, Wendy's, every time you eat, Wendy's is always a good choice because that was his favorite. But Hewitt was leading. We got to Greg Staub. Hewitt bonsai'd underneath him, and I was on the cushion around the top 1 and 2. Staub moved up, got me over the cushion. I got her in the fence and turned it over. Second night out on a brand new chassis, and it broke the roll cage off and broke the car apart. Flipped and didn't know it. I'd broken my neck at the time. Didn't know that. Knew I had a really bad headache and felt like Albert Pujols hit me in the back of the head with a full swing, home run swing. It hurt, and so little ambulance infield.
Wait, so you broke the cage off the car completely?
Completely.
And
shoulder harnesses were hooked to the back of the roll cage.
Right.
Had 35 gallons of fuel in the tank because we had just had a red shortly before. So topped it back off, knew where we were on fuel. Cage left, shoulder harnesses were pulling back, lap belts were hooked to the bottom frame rails. So the lap belt stayed, crotch strap stayed, shoulder harnesses were going with the roll cage, so it kept pulling me up in the car. I kept pulling myself down with the steering wheel because first time over it hit and the cage hit me in the back of the head, and I knew it was gone. I blew the hood off of it, and I watched the cage go away as it's folding me over the steering wheel. So it bent the steering wheel down and then butterflied it back up because it pushed down, and then I was hanging on it, pulled back up, and just distorted the hell out of the steering wheel. And it flipped and tumbled. It flipped 7 times. My head left marks, the helmet left marks in racetrack. They went back and were looking at those, told me about it later on.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, it does. My eyes weren't quite focused on that stuff.
Right.
So the car ends up on its side on the banking in the middle of 1 and 2.
Right.
Wilbur Huffman, neat old guy that ran a record truck there. Come over, he didn't mom make sandwiches. He'd come hang with us and just always around. Always parked and turned forward with his wrecker, and he was the first guy to get to me. And I pushed back on the steering wheel and opened the whole car up, and roll cage moves back, seat moves back, everything opens up. And I had enough room to crawl out of it then, because it was, when it ended up, it had all folded over on top of me, so I pushed
Wait,
back.
so when they unbuckled you out of the car...
No, I unbuckled me.
But when you unbuckled, did the back half of the car fall off? Were
Fell
you
over.
the link holding the car?
I was the only thing holding it. There was nothing but
Wow.
seat belts holding the two things together.
You're lucky you weren't pulled apart.
That's part of being thick.
Well, just to go a little further though, to get into this though, like from what I had heard, this, and tell me if I'm wrong, from what I had heard, this crash was the impetus for what we now know as the Beast chassis today, right? Or it was
you get
the motivation.
It was Dad's motivation because he was a little pissed that this thing came apart as bad as it did, and they'd used, we think they used annealed chromoly tubing. It wasn't conditioned in, it was annealed. So the tubing, it didn't break a weld anywhere. The tubes ripped all the way through the whole car.
Okay.
And ripped every tube that let go. And the rear hoop on that roll cage, this tube right here that comes up and around, that is 1 3/8 120 wall on a Challenger. Mm-hmm. That's thick stuff. Right. Bottom rail was 83, top rail was 95, hoop was 120. They made that cage solid, and it broke that 120 tube off like there was nothing to it. So, and there was never anything fessed up about it or anything else. There was a kid at Knoxville that crashed one of them first, 88.5 Challenger, broke the cage off of it. They gave him a new car. He put the new car together. 2 weeks after his crash, I crashed mine, broke the cage off of it, broke the car apart. Now, his wasn't as bad as what mine was. Mine was 2 separate pieces. It was all gone. 2 weeks after mine, Brad Doty crashed, and got paralyzed, got hurt, and Brad
wow.
Doty's crash was pretty famous. At Eldora also.
So it was one of those batch of cars that
Yes.
paralyzed him.
What's really bad about the whole thing is the Wednesday before, they were running World of Outlaws at Knoxville. We loaded my 88 car because we had to return it to them in the back of the pickup truck. We loaded my 88 and a half in 2 pieces, stacked it in the back of the truck, and my headache had calmed down enough that it wasn't absolutely excruciatingly miserable. So Dad and I drove to Des Moines, Iowa, where Challenger was. We returned the 88 car to them, and when we rolled in, and we had both cars in the back of the truck, 1 in 2 pieces, 1 in 1. And Doty was there because he was driving for Gary Stanton, and Stanton was Challenger car before he sold it to the Annette family. So Stanton's there working on his stuff, and Doty comes walking over to say hi to us and see what's going on. Looks in the back of the truck, goes, "Oh my God, what is this?" And just, yeah, destroyed that thing at Eldora a week and a half ago, and just now getting the cobwebs out of my head where we could return them, bring it over here and show them what happened.
Right.
Doty turns, he goes, grabs Stanton, comes over and says, "Gary, come, so he brings him over. He says, "Gary, will our car do this?" Gary just shrugged his shoulders, looked at him, and like, man, I don't know. So he and my dad go having a conversation, and they go walking off. This is Wednesday.
Brad and your dad, or
No,
Gary and your
Gary
dad?
Stanton and my dad
Okay.
go walking off. They've been friends forever. Stanton worked out of our shop when Schumann was driving for him. He was around all the time. I mean, another hero I grew up around. Stanton was cool. You don't realize how cool your dad is because you're there with him all the time.
Right.
And all these other guys come through. Lee Osborne, Gary Stanton, all these guys come through that are, man, these guys are cool. Man, these are neat. That's Dad. He's Dad. He's the same guy all the time. He's the guy who chews my ass when I do wrong.
Right.
These guys are great. They
These
don't
are the
chew my
legends
ass.
right
These are
over
legends
here.
over
Yeah,
here. And so they go walking off, have a conversation. Doty, he's talking to me, and we're talking about what happened and this and that. And this is Wednesday night. Saturday night was when Doty crashed and he got hurt. So just a few days later.
So that was a few days later.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he'd already seen the car in the back of the truck, and I don't know, we've talked about it a little bit. I don't know if that was in his mind at the time or what, but
So you had spoken to him about this after the crash?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
We've talked about it a couple times, and the biggest thing I wanted to tell him was these things get kind of stupid. Dad's a big tough guy. I was back in the middle of another miserable headache. They ran in waves. They just, like a week and a half long of a headache. If you put them on a 10 scale, you could take 3 and get rid of it because it never got it never got lower than a 3. They stayed at 3 was the best it got, and then 9.5 was shaking and kind of.
So you didn't go to the hospital after the wreck?
Eldora, when you crash there, you go to Clearwater. And, man, I'm going to tell you what, you're better at a veterinary clinic. Because those people are terrible. They hate racers. They leave you sitting. They're just miserable, and everybody knows not to go to Clearwater. If you're hurt really bad, which I guess I was, but we didn't realize it because I was walking away and too stubborn and dumb to do anything different. If you're hurt really bad and they take you out there in a helicopter, you get to go to Dayton. That hospital is a whole lot better, but it's quite a bit farther away. So I'd already made up my mind that, and again, I crashed a lot. I got this experience down. I know this is going to hurt for a while. I know I'm going to have a headache and a concussion, and it's good. So I wanted to go home and have my headache and my stuff in my own bed and not in a miserable hospital bed somewhere. So the medical guys told my mom, God love moms, they're awesome. If he throws up, don't let him sleep, first of all, with a concussion. Wake him up, make sure he comes alert, this and that.
You can get amnesia, right?
Yeah, well, no, you can have brain bleeds and you can die.
Oh, okay.
So while you're, everybody thinks you're asleep and actually you've passed away and died because of the brain injury of the concussion. You can have a stroke, you can have a blood vessel pop, you can have all kinds of problems, and you can actually die from a concussion when they think you're just sleeping. And when you hurt your head, you want to sleep a lot. So they told Mom, wake him up every half hour, shake him, make sure he comes back to. If he throws up, he's nauseous, anything else, his head injury is really bad, need to get him to a hospital, this and that. We drove out of the gate of Eldora. By the time we all piled in, Mom, Dad, and little sister, and I believe Shannon Saldana was with us again that night. She was Shannon Ridenauer. Didn't even pay attention to Joey back then. Now they got it made. Cool family, cool, great group. But Shannon was with us too, so I think 4 of them in the front seat of the pickup truck. I laid across the back seat in absolute agony and misery with our family chow dog kind of on my chest and rode home that way. We roll up out of there. I moved the dog to the floor because Eldora that day, at that time, you went out the back gate, turned, went up the hill, all the way up and out the gate and out onto 227, and it was like a roller coaster coming home. Driving up out of there, I tell Dad, man, you got to pull over. And he moves over to the side, and I open the door, and I'm throwing up everywhere. And
okay.
so, not to get graphic, back in the truck, we go. We get out on 227. Man, we're not 2 miles from the place. Hey, pull over. So we're off the side of the road again. I'm throwing up again. Climb back in the truck. This happens 4 times. We're not 15, 20 minutes from the racetrack, and I've thrown up everything I have. The 4th time I'm in the ditch, I'm puking. My granddad had done this to my dad. He leans over and does it to me. And pardon my French here, but he looks at me, he says, hey, if you throw up something that's hairy and tastes like shit, that's your asshole. You got to swallow that back in. I mean, you know how hard it is to laugh when you're in the ditch throwing up. Your head hurts like it's a football.
Yeah, meanwhile, you're retching from dry heaves and everything else.
Laughing like hell at him.
Okay,
you know,
so
this is a family race trip.
So just to fast forward a little bit, okay, all of that happens and all that goes on. How does the birth of the Beast chassis begin? Because I had heard, fill in the gaps, okay? I had heard that the Beast chassis was originally designed by your dad.
Yes.
And Bob went to work for you guys, or he was going to build sprint cars and midgets, or you were going to build First off, who originally designed the first car?
Dad designed it on a Waffle House placemat. Now,
Really?
We're not talking glass front Waffle House like we have here in the South. In Indiana, we had a sit-down Waffle House, a little bit more fancy, but regular restaurant. But they had these really neat corrugated placemats, and we're in there. He was thinking all the time. He was trying to all the time make a better mousetrap. So we're sitting there, and he's drawing out, and he's come up with this. We're sitting there at breakfast.
Because he was pissed about what happened to the
he was ill because of what had happened to the Challenger. We put a car together. We finished the year out. After that, we raced the rest of the season. Going into the next year, his jigs had been put away. He hadn't built cars for quite a while. So we dragged the jigs back out, and he decided, hell with it, we're going back to building cars because we're not going to have this problem anymore. So he designed, and it was the first one with down tubes, and the center tubes came to a V at the motor plate. Made it like a bridge with the truss tubes and everything in a bridge, so it was good and strong. You couldn't crush it. You couldn't go anywhere with it. These two coming in at an angle from the back corners of the roll cage coming forward, and the front torsion tubes behind those just in front of the engine. From that point to the motor plate and the back to the motor plate, that had a big V in the center of the car, and then the rest of the car was down tubes and had your upright for your engine plate. And his concept is he's right, when you bend a piece of tubing, you weaken it. So the car had as much straight tubing in it as it possibly could. So he because you do. If you bend a tube, you have to put an upright tube at that point where you bend it, or that tube sits there, that bend sits there, and it opens and closes. It moves.
Right.
So there's no rigidity there anymore.
No, I have seen a Beast chassis bare, and there's a lot of triangulation in it.
A lot of triangulation.
Yeah.
So he drew the sprint car up, and that was his concept for the sprint car, knew his torsion heights, knew all the stuff. Bob was at Challenger. We'd broken this car. Challenger was building a bunch of midgets. They had a pretty good clientele. Bob was flying back to do the Indianapolis Thursday Night Thunder midget races at IRP, and it's always going to be IRP. But he was flying back doing those. So we'd pick him up at the airport. He'd stay with us at the house. He'd stay over for a day or two. He and Dad would talk about things, and he told him, he says, man, I want to leave Challenger. I want to do my own thing. So Dad says, well, here you go. This is my concept. This is my print. We can scale this down and we can make a midget out of it. And Bob wanted to do midgets. He was really into midgets at the time. So all he wanted to do was build midgets. And he and Dad had an agreement. We'd build the sprint cars and the Champ Dirt cars. He'd build the midgets.
Okay.
And he could move in and do it right out of our shop. We had equipment. We had all stuff there. We were building cars.
So you guys had no interest in building the midgets?
Not really. No, we were busy enough trying to do sprint cars and Champ Dirt cars. Okay. And Bob had the midget clientele. He had all the guys. My whole time, I never ran a midget. I picked on things my own size, and I was too damn big for a midget. So I always ran the bigger cars. I went from go-karts to sprint cars, and we went on. So Bob had, like I say, he had all his Challenger guys. And when he was leaving Challenger, he was going to build the Challenger midget and just continue on, just build his own version of the Challenger midget. Well, Dad shows him this, and away we go. He gets started with that. It's like, yeah, that'd be great. Can we do this? So Mom actually came up with a beast name, and she put in the Speed Sport News, "The Beast is coming." She put different ads in. She paid for them. She put ads in for Bob. "The Beast is coming." Different stuff here and there. She'd call Corinna Kanamaki, and they'd line the stuff up, and they'd put things in there. Nobody knew what the Beast was, but there were ads in there for 6 months or better before that thing came out that the Beast is coming. It's kind of cool. Now you look back on it and go, oh, that's pretty slick. So we scaled everything down. Honest to God, that first Beast car was built on a sheet of plywood, all drawn out, full scale. We knew the bends of our tubing bender, knew the radiuses, laid all the tubes out, laid out the radiuses, figured everything out, picked up all the pickup points, the arc of the rear end, the arc of the front axle, where you put your radius rod points to get your front axle arc to go the way you want to, where your rear radius rod points bolt on, where your engine location is, U-joint coming off the back of the crankshaft, torque tube going to the rear end, torsion arms as they go. The rear end is moving in a forward arc off the motor plate. Torsion arms are moving in an opposite arc. You think about it, they're going from the rear, and they're swinging from the rear mount, the rear end swinging from a front mount because it's off torque tube coming forward. So everything has to go together. Figured Jacob's ladder mounting points, figured everything up, shock locations, put everything together on this plywood board, and then built the first frame rails to fit everything on the plywood board. Now we had to come up above it because the roll cage was taller than the 4x8 sheet of plywood. So we added on and went from there.
That is the half, though. Like that is the one half of the
lays one
chassis.
frame rail side down.
Okay, and then there's
so
the other, and then they come together.
Both of those the same because you build them. They're the exact same. They're mirror image. So you build them and just one. When you stand them up, two sides come together, and then it's just cross tubes in between in the jig. So you stand the two sides up. You can build those and stack them up like cordwood. Stand them up, put the tubes together between them, finish the roll cage out, finish all your cross tubes out.
Okay, so you guys are building the sprint cars and the Champ Dirt cars. He's building the midgets. When did you guys start going in different directions?
Bob had midget. Let's do this politically correct the best we can. Bob had midget customers that wanted to get into sprint cars. Some of them we built sprint cars for. Bob also saw the money potentials in building sprint cars himself. So John Bickford and Jeff Gordon wanted a sprint car. Bob didn't really want to let that one go away, I believe. So he was starting to tell these guys.
Because Jeff Gordon was a rising star.
Exactly, rising star. Okay. And they had money and they were doing things right. So he had guys that were wanting sprint cars, and he started taking orders, deposits for orders of sprint cars. And he started telling his customers that, hey, if you give me a little bit, I'll be in a new shop and we'll start building sprint cars. Now, he was working at our shop, and there was not really a rent going on. It was he and Dad and Bob were really good friends. And even when Bob drove for Coulter out in California, he'd tear things up, crash cars. Coulter, I'm going to fire this kid. And Dad's like, nah, send me the chassis. We'll fix it. We'll send it back. Keep him in a ride. My dad and Bob's dad were buddies from the beginning. So he kept doing things to help him out. So they ran out of our address so that Ellison, Bobby, and Amy could go to school in Brownsburg schools. So Dad took him to the bankers and introduced him to his bankers and got him hooked up and just all the things through the deal. When Bob started having customers that wanted sprint cars, he saw the potential there and was working on getting his own shop where he could do this stuff. So he got back to us. We had one of his midget car owners call and ask us, well, why aren't you building sprint cars anymore? We understand you're just building sprint cars, Champ Dirt cars for yourself, for your own stuff. You're not building for everybody else anymore. Dad says, no, that's not true at all. That's, no, we got them stacked up here. We've got cars standing on a rear bumper mounts. Right.
These were customers calling your dad looking for a car?
Looking for a car, but they had talked to Bob, and Bob told them that we weren't building cars anymore. Okay. For everybody else, we were just building for ourselves now. So if they give him a deposit, he would, when he got into his bigger shop, he'd start building sprint cars, and they'd get on the list early. Okay. So Dad gets wind of this, finds out it came from Bob. So he calls Rick Carmichael, one of his friends in Indy. Rick comes out to the shop. Our offices were in the front of the shop. Bob's office was in the back of the shop with just off the edge of the fab shop area back there. He had his own section of the shop. So Dad had Rick Carmichael call Bob on, you pick up two lines at the same time so you can hear the whole conversation. And Rick was another car owner wanting two midgets, a sprint car, and a Champ Dirt car. And talked to Bob, said, hey, I want to get two midgets from you, and then I'm going to get a sprint car and a Champ Dirt car from Stapp all at the same time. We'll do this thing. I'll pick them all up at one, if we can get them all choreographed, pick them up there and the whole thing. And Bob told him the same thing. Like, well, they're not building for everybody anymore. They're just building their own stuff, but I'm getting ready to build sprint cars and champ dirt cars. So if you'll give me a deposit, I'll get you on the list. He says, I already have quite a few on the list, but I'll get you on the list. And as soon as I start building those, we'll get your cars built and get you taken care of. So Dad heard enough in that conversation, and Rick finishes the conversation up. And then two of them walk through the shop, walk into Bob's office, and he's sitting there behind his desk, back kind of happy and proud because he just sold another couple cars, got deposits coming. And Dad walks up and, hey, Bob, this is Rick Carmichael. He was just so-and-so on the phone with you as a car owner. And I'm a little confused. Why am I not building sprint cars and champ dirt cars anymore? What happened to our agreement?
Uh-oh.
And, yeah, that's exactly what Bob did. Was, he got up and and out the door he left. Gone. Left his wife and kids sitting there in the shop, and he jumped in his van and took off. And so that night they came back and moved their stuff out in the middle of the night, a lot of their stuff, some of our stuff, and there was a monetary difference in a lot of things. Dad really never cared to pursue all that. It just was really more feelings hurt because his buddy did him wrong.
So why not continue to just build cars? Why did he stop?
Dad?
Yeah.
Oh, we did. We kept building cars. We kept building sprint cars and champ dirt cars also.
So they were basically the same
car.
It was the same car.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
He had copied our jigs and stuff and knew the pickup points and the size and everything else, and he had done all that. So he moved to another shop and carried on. He started building sprint cars and champ dirt cars, and we continued on.
Wow.
And then they had the speed shop going. We moved the speed shop into the section he was in. It had a big speed shop, and I had complications from my crash that I had headaches and concussion complications. So I gave up after a while. We built, Rocky Hodges was one of the Jasper Petit car, Gary Hayhurst up in Wisconsin. And we had a Daryl Dodd. We had a bunch of guys that had our stuff winged and dirt, pavement, winged and non-winged cars. And we had quite a few cars out, a couple champ dirt cars out. And Dad had his own champ dirt car. Conroy had one that Jim Mahoney drove. We had a pretty cool variety of race cars out. And Bob had the clientele from the midget side, and he had the guys that had quite a bit of money, and he started going as well. And it just went on until we got into other things and went a different direction again.
I got you. Changing the subject a little bit, we're going to have Joe Gertie on eventually as a guest on the show, talking with Susanna. I heard a funny story.
You might want to save this for Joe, but this is a great
We're going to ask him about it too.
Yes.
I heard a funny story about his dad borrowing a trailer from you guys, and somebody got their family jewels hurt. Fill me in.
Absolutely.
Fill me in the story.
We had an open trailer. We hauled the cars that Puncher drove. Dad's house cars around on forever. Okay. Single axle, open trailer, toolbox on the front, double row tire rack, middle of the trailer. Joe and Earl had a really neat hauler and setup, and they sold that one, and we're waiting to get their next one built, and that one was running behind. So they wanted to keep racing, so Earl asked Dad, "Hey, can we borrow? You got a trailer we can borrow?" He's like, "Yeah." So hooked him up. So this toolbox on the front's kind of neat. It has a lid on it. And you can put your toolbox or your tools or your jack and anything you need inside there.
Like my little open trailer?
Like your little open trailer.
Okay.
It's a little triangulated, squared off parallelogram toolbox on the front. Well, the tire rack is right behind it. In the front row of the tire rack, you feed from the front. In the back row, you feed from the back. End of the night, those hurry-up deals, and Earl swings a left rear tire up. And when he hits the bar at the back, it comes back and hits the lid on the toolbox that happened to be up. And that lid swung around and pushed his belly out of the way. And Earl always wore work pants, baggy work pants, comfortable things. Well, it caught one testicle on the inside of the box and one on the outside, and it slammed down. And this box had this little latch that you could put a padlock in and make it safe. Uh-huh. So as it did, the latch cammed over because the thing slammed down hard enough. It swung around and cammed over and hooked on it. Well, there's a little hook on the back side. And Jerry Franklin was there, and Earl's like, help. And
So
Jerry comes running over.
So he's caught by his nuts in the trailer.
He's caught, yeah. He's scrotum on one nad on the inside, one on the outside, and pinched. And, you got to consider it had a lip of an inch over the top of it. So Jerry comes over, and Earl's explaining to him what's going on, and Jerry's in a panic trying to help him out, and he's trying to get the latch off. And Earl's like, you got to hurry. I can't stand up any longer. And Jerry looks at him, he says, but I got to push down on the lid to get the latch to release. Earl's, I don't even care right now. Do whatever you got to do. So Jerry pushes down, gets the latch released, opens the lid. Earl's free. He kind of pretty well falls backwards to the ground. And yeah, that's Dad still owns this trailer. They have it because Dad has restored the cars that Pancho drove for us. We won the championships with. Right. And they're going to ride around on this trailer as well because that's part of the deal. That's the way they ran it the whole time. And
they still have the trailer.
He still has the trailer. Had it all sandblasted.
I'm totally going to
repainted.
I'm going to ask Joe.
On the lid of the trailer, it has Earl's Nutcracker painted on it. Rick Sanders lettered it all on there. He lettered the trailer back up with a Dobbin Chevrolet and everything, and he lettered across the top of the lid of the toolbox. And yeah, Earl, that whole family, the things that we did together through the years, like I say, they did basically 90% of my engine stuff the whole time I ran. 45 minutes to an hour away from us. It was so convenient. If you had an issue, you ain't pop that thing out and go to Gertie's and, tune it, whatever. We plug it on the dyno, get things sorted. We tried some different things at times that we needed to kind of sort through. It was really, I can say it was really never their problem. It was stuff maybe we were doing it, we were trying. But always had good, reliable, killer horsepower from them.
Yeah.
And
I mean, just the Gertie name is, everybody knows it. If you ran sprint cars, you had to have a Gertie engine.
Exactly. Sprint cars or stock cars, either one.
Right.
Earl liked Chinese food. Earl loved different Chinese places. Mm-hmm. He was on a Valvoline deal. Jimmy Reynolds and the guys at the Valvoline at the Speedway would hook him up with fuel and oil and everything for his dyno. So we had one day that Earl was on his way down on a Wednesday or Thursday to pick up a load of oil. And he got held up, as you do when you own a business. Couldn't get away, so he was running late. So we get a phone call. Hey, is there any way you can run into Valvoline, load this stuff up, and then I'll meet you for dinner tonight, and we'll transfer? Absolutely. If you don't tell Earl no, that guy's cool. So I ran into Valvoline with a pickup truck, loaded all the gear oil, engine oil, fuel, everything else in our truck. And then when he got into town later on, we met at a Chinese restaurant on the north side of town, one he frequented and liked. And we met there. We had dinner with him and then transferred everything from one truck to the other. And he went back to Rochester. We went back to Brownsburg. Well, that went over so well, and a good little Chinese place. So from that point on, every time Earl needed oil and fuel from the Speedway, I'd run in and get it, and we'd meet for Chinese dinner. It became kind of a little traditional thing. Every couple of weeks we'd meet up and have a good dinner with Earl and transfer everything over and send him back home.
That's cool. Yeah. We're going to wrap it up real quick, but before we do, looking at, all the racing that you've done now and all of the things that have gone on between your NASCAR career, IndyCar. We haven't even touched on the IndyCar and the NASCAR stuff. We're going to have to do that. We're going to have you back on again to talk about your years working with Dale Earnhardt and all of that. But
man, usually I get kicked out of places they don't want me back. Are you sure you need to reconsider this?
There's so many great stories. We could sit here all day going back and forth, but we're going to wrap it up soon. But before we go, you've been around the sport for years. What is it that's some of the things that the sport's lacking nowadays? We're seeing decline in ratings. We're seeing decline in attendance at tracks. And when I'm not talking about the big stuff, I'm talking about racing in general. It's expensive to do, but what do you think is lacking in the sport nowadays?
It's not so much what's lacking; it's what's overly available. It's overly available to all these kids to sit there with their phones and play video games. Oh. In the old days, there's a few things lacking. I'll get you a good answer for. Mm-hmm. In the old days, we had open trailers. You drove through all these little towns with your sprint car on a trailer. Every kid in that town would watch you go by, and you could watch your mouth. Dad, can we go to the races?
Yeah.
And then the family load up, and they'd come to the races.
Dick Berggren said the best advertisement was an open trailer for short track racing. Yeah?
Absolutely. Okay. Another genius guy, Dick Berggren.
Yeah.
He's been there. He's seen it all. He knows it. So you had open trailers. Then for convenience, it's all convenience thing. Then we went to enclosed trailers. Now you have the semi-trailers and all this stuff, and they have lettering on them, but the kids don't see what's inside that thing, and it's just not the same. So those kids now, when a trailer goes by, their heads are down looking at a computer or their phone or whatever else, and they have other things on their mind. Everything developed and changed out. there's so much more entertainment right now. So many more things you can go do. Life gets so full of everything going on, and we're just overly stimulated. Back even when I was running, there weren't nearly as many things to do. You go to the races. The people that came to the races knew these drivers because they came to the short tracks and they watched these guys run. Pancho Carter right here on the cover of the Salt City 100.
It's a legend.
Absolutely.
Right there, yeah.
I was lucky enough to grow up with him driving Dad's race cars. Unbelievable driver. One of my heroes to this day, the things I watched him do. You watched him start out in midgets, sprint cars, champ dirt cars, and then the Indy cars. That following that followed him all the way to Indy cars picked him up in the midgets and sprint car days and watched him, knew him, talked to him at the racetrack, went to places to watch him race, and the other heroes that raced as well.
They had a personal connection to him.
Had a personal connection. They were friends. They knew each other. You know,
so that's what you think we're lacking, that personal connection nowadays, right?
Dude, I did 20 years in the NASCAR world. Those guys were better. I did a few years, 4 years with the IndyCar series in the IndyCar world, 5 years, somewhere in there. The IndyCar guys, you could watch them at the racetrack on their scooter, and they'd kind of try and avoid and hide from all the fans. The NASCAR guys were pretty good about it early on. Now they just walk by and sign an autograph and hand things back. There's nothing personal anymore because it grew so big. There's so many people trying to get their time. They have things they have to do. They're fined, and they move back. They go to the back row if they don't make it to driver introduction in time. Well, it's really hard to stand there and keep signing autographs for people when you have to be at driver introduction. You have all these things you have to do. And you even have to go through the porta-john and take a leak somewhere before you climb in that thing. So they have to have a little bit of time to do this stuff, and the people just go crazy bombarding them with everything, and they can't get through to do that. On a smaller scale, it's nowhere near the pressure. It's nowhere near the schedule. It's nowhere near the amount of people. You can have a personal relationship with these guys and get to know them. NHRA may have a lot of problems, but that part of it with their pit area being open to everybody, that's one of the coolest things in racing. I'm a big motorcycle. I love Supercross. I love flat track guys because sprint car guys have to have heroes too. Those guys are badass. So I watch all the Supercrosses. I watch all the stuff. And I will tell you right now, Ralph Shaheen, the voice of Supercross, man, I mean, I don't want to date your show, but he's not doing Supercross right now. And there's
a lot of us not doing
I record
a lot of
them
work
now,
right now
so that I can fast forward through, because Lee Diffie's very good at what he does, but he's not my favorite at Supercross. So it's lacking. Ricky Carmichael's greatest of all time. He's not as good as an announcer as he was with two legs over a motorcycle. So Ralph had that deal covered. He and Jeff Emig were great. I love that part of it. I like the personal side of a lot of this racing stuff. We had all that. These cars, stock cars, Indy cars, ran on bias ply tires.
So personality is what you think we're lacking.
Personality is part of what we're lacking. The racing isn't as good as it used to be. Now everybody says, oh, yeah, it's tighter, it's this and that. We used to have bias ply tires. The guys slide the cars around, took drivers. Now I'm so sick and tired of aero dependent. Even our sprint cars, even our wing sprint cars. Man, I love non-wing sprint cars because there's no aero crap to those. It's go get the job done. I've been watching the guys at Bubba. I love watching USAC races. I love going home middle of summer and catching Indiana Sprint Week. I did 20 years in the NASCAR world. I wouldn't walk across the street right here if they were paying me $1,000 to go watch a cup race. I'll drive 14 hours to go watch a sprint car race anywhere. And even farther if it's a non-winger.
Yeah, you've told me that. You've been very vocal about
it's
being
easy
a sprint
enough.
car guy and not a NASCAR guy.
I did the stock cars. I saw it all. I saw the greed. I saw the stuff that went on. When you go to a NASCAR race and you take your family, the expenses of what's going, there is no reason for a hot dog or a hamburger to be $8 at any racetrack, and there's no reason for a Coke to be $4. That is just absolutely raping the people that come. And that kind of stuff drives people away because nobody wants to be treated that way. That's a big part of what's lacking nowadays. Go to Eldora. Tony Stewart's got his stuff together. You can go in and get a hot dog and a hamburger for about the same price you could get them for when I drove there. And they're good. The food's good, and you can go in and you're not getting taken advantage of. You don't have to have these high-dollar motel rooms. You don't have to have all this stuff. You can go back dirt track racing, go back to the roots, enjoy the people, have some fun, and go to where you can talk to people and go racing.
Those are great subjects, and we are going to talk about them again because we're going to have you back. There's so much great material here. We are going to have you back. We got to wrap it up today. Want to thank you for coming in on the show. It's really great to have you here, and definitely going to share some more stories, we hope, in the future.
I'm just getting started, but that intro with Grandma, we got to get her down here, and we're going to Millbridge, and we're going to put your helmet on her, and we're going to put your helmet on you.
She passed away last year, but anybody that knew her knew how fast she drove. Matter of fact, my brother's wedding, or it was my nephew's christening, we told Noki Finaro, Noki, legend behind the wheel, following my grandmother to the hall to go have the party. And I told him, you keep up with her. And he just looked at me like, you know who you're talking to? Yeah. He called me halfway there. He was like, holy shit. He's like, I'm going to call Scrivani and let him know that we've got a driver the next time I get sick. That was just an idea what my grandmother was like. But want to thank you for coming on the show. Andy Stapp joins us here in the studio. It's been a great time. The stories are just amazing. The history that this guy has behind him is unbelievable. And we're going to catch him again. We're going to have him back on the episode one more time. Thank you for joining us on the Derek Pernesiglio Show, and we'll see you for the next time around.